Okay, conflict management. Everyone's got a view on it. There's a lot of material around it. I put some slides together that I'm going to narrate through that encapsulate some, for me, of the key issues around conflict management. It's something that needs to be done better. It's an inevitable thing. It can be a very positive thing to work upon if you have the skills to do it well. And so I'm going to hit on a few of those. So I'll start with this. Each party must have a vested interest in the outcome and a belief that a solution can be developed that represents their convictions. This is from Gitlow and McNary. So each party must have a vested interest in the outcome. Conflict is all about resolving something one way or the other. It's rarely a harmonious thing. Typically, one party will gain more than the other. Let's be honest about it, simply because absolute harmony is so hard to achieve. But each party must have a vested interest in the outcome. You've got to have some heart in it. You've got to believe that an outcome is worth working towards. And also a belief that a solution can be developed that represents convictions. In other words, there's a purpose in trying to manage the conflict. It's not just a matter of conflict with conflict state. It's about trying to resolve something positively to get to a better place than you are currently. So, two principles of assertion, because behaving assertively is a lot of what this is about. To manage conflict, you need to be able to show assertiveness skills. That isn't about aggression, that is about assertion, standing up for your rights whilst respecting the rights of others. The work of Ken and Kate Back really is worth looking at here. So two principles of assertion. You don't get what you don't ask for. You get a lot of what you ask for. In other words, people don't give things to you just because they want to. They gift things to you, if at all, because you've worked for them, you've sought them. Sometimes you've been very direct and said, this is what I want. It's much more likely you'll get what you want if you ask for it. You get a lot of what you ask for, a surprising amount. People who don't do this have no idea just how much they would have got if they'd only asked. Sometimes it's a simpler route to where you want to get to simply by asking for it. And if you don't get what you're looking for, then you can enter into a process of conflict management, the use of negotiation skills. But two principles of assertion. You don't get what you don't ask for. You get a lot of what you ask for. Next up, three common reactions when confronted with a difficult interpersonal situation. Strike back, give in, break off, from the work of William Ury. Getting Past No is, for me, the best book on negotiation. It's very direct, it's full of very powerful learning, and it's well written. So William Ury says three common reactions when confronted with a difficult interpersonal situation is to strike back. Boom, sometimes without thinking, sometimes instinctively, sometimes on the basis of, I just had to do that. Well, no, you don't. You can stop and think about it and behave more skillfully. So striking back is very often the impulsive one that we need to fight against. The other common reaction when confronted with a difficult interpersonal situation is to give in. Okay, have it. I'm not prepared to fight for it. It doesn't mean enough to me. I don't need this grief. You give in. And the other one is to break off. Hang on a minute. I need to go away and think about this. I need to take advice. I just need to give it some reflection and thought. So three common reactions when confronted with a difficult interpersonal situation: strike back, give in, break off. It all makes sense. 4 levels of conflict. I'm covering a lot of ground here. I've got an awful lot of material on this. I've tried to be selective. 4 levels of conflict. The first is intrapersonal. That's interesting. Number 2 is interpersonal, perhaps the most obvious. Number 3 is intra-group. And number 4 is intergroup. I'd like to hit on the first one. 4 levels of conflict. The first level of conflict is intrapersonal. I reckon we have a lot of conflict within ourselves. A lot of the conversations we have with ourselves are, should I do this? Should I have done that? Or that didn't go so well, or I'm good, or I'm not so good at this. Much of the conflict we experience is within ourselves, is intrapersonal. Number 2, interpersonal, between people, between myself and one or more other people. Interpersonal is probably where we default to in terms of conflict management. A lot more intrapersonal goes on, but interpersonal is probably where we start from. Intra-group is within group. So within this group, whatever this group is, whether it's a work group which has continuity, whether it's a ad hoc group, whatever type of group it is, there's very often conflict within it that needs resolving. And number 4 is intergroup. So just as there was intrapersonal and intragroup, there's interpersonal, intergroup. Between two groups, they involve different dynamics, they involve different skills, they have different ways of resolving conflict. I'm not providing all the answers here, I'm just coming up with more questions. 5 phases of conflict. 1, the phase of anticipation. This can be an excitable phase. Anticipation could be of something with opportunity. It could be something that in the past has said, right, I can do this better. Whatever it is, the first phase of conflict is anticipation. The more conscious and deliberate that is, the better, because that means that an awareness of how best to get the outcome you seek is more likely than just being taken by surprise by everything. So preparation is about managing the phase of anticipation. Number 2 is the phase of conscious but unexpressed difference. So I'm aware of where the differences lie. I'm aware and conscious of where there's likely to be conflict, but there isn't yet an opportunity to actually express that, maybe because the meeting between the parties has not yet taken place. So phase 1, the phase of anticipation. Phase 2, the phase of conscious but unexpressed difference. And phase 3, the phase of discussion. This is when there's the coming together. It could be a coming together, an adjournment, and a re-coming together. It could be a coming together as a one-off meet to discuss. But irrespective, it's the phase of discussion. And discussion is all about stating positions, maneuvering, asking questions, bargaining and trading. All the negotiation stuff's in there. So 3 is the phase of discussion. 4 is the phase of open dispute, where there is conflict. That's what we're about here. And open dispute means, hey, these are things on which we don't agree. These are things that it's not easy to resolve. And 5 is the phase of open conflict. Well, the hell with it. I don't see any way we're going to manage this. We've got to find a way to mitigate, to lessen, to diminish the impact, perhaps. We go beyond dispute and we're into conflict. It doesn't have to get to that point. If your negotiation skills are up to it and circumstances allow, you could get through a dispute without it turning into conflict. This is from the work of Tannenbaum and Schmidt, who for many years said many very sensible things. So 5 conflict management styles. 5 ways in which we can go about conflict management. And again, I would suggest the effective conflict manager has a range, a wide repertoire of these. It isn't just channeled into one of these or 2 of these alone, because circumstances and context would require the use of different skills. So 5 conflict management skills from the work of Blake and Mouton. There's some pretty big names floating about here. So the first conflict management style is forcing, then withdrawing, then smoothing, then compromising, then problem solving. Now, it could be that someone has all 5 of these. Great, bully for them, because that makes them potentially very useful. But if you've only got forcing and withdrawing, then you're missing smoothing, compromising, and problem solving. If all you've got is compromising, then you're missing out on the more forceful forcing style, for instance. So the more of these that can be developed and can be made use of, maybe within a group of people rather than just one, the better. The key thing is the effectiveness of these is contextual. So 5 ways to manage conflict. And this is from Thomas and Kilman. Competing, collaborating, avoiding, accommodating, compromising. 5 ways to manage conflict. Competing is assertive and uncooperative. So competing is about saying, right, I want this, and that's what I want. If you want something else, I want what I want, and I'm not really bothered, or I'm not concerned about what you want. It's all about me. I'm competing with you. I want to get a better outcome than you. It's assertive and it's uncooperative. Collaborating is also assertive, but it's cooperative. So collaborating is about saying, hey, we both want different things. I think we can both get an outcome here. Let's work towards it. Let's not compete. Let's try and work together to achieve an outcome for both of us, which is acceptable. That's collaborating. After competing and collaborating, we've got avoiding. It's unassertive and it's uncooperative. So in other words, it's unassertive because you're choosing not to be forceful. You're choosing not to collaborate or compete. You're being unassertive. you're being uncooperative, you're avoiding. So let's just not go there because I don't think I've got the skills for it, or, oh gosh, I just don't want to go there. I can't cope with this at the minute. For all sorts of reasons, we avoid conflict. And I'll tell you what, I've been reflecting on this a lot. And I think that irrespective of the skills we possess, I think a lot of us choose consciously or unconsciously to avoid a lot more conflict than we may believe. And I think it's not always a bad thing. We shouldn't assume that avoiding conflict is always a bad thing. It's not a meek-mannered thing. Sometimes avoiding conflict is the right thing to do at that time and in that context. Or choose another time to come back to this. I'm going to avoid it now, but I'll come back to it because I'm going to seek a collaborative or even a competing solution. Now is not the time. Other times you think, it's just not worth it. Let's just leave it alone. So avoiding, I think, is the default for a lot of the time. By Thomas and Kilman's analysis, is unassertive and it's uncooperative. So we've got competing, we've got collaborating, we've got avoiding. We've got two more. Accommodating is unassertive and cooperative. So accommodating is about saying, okay, I'm pretty much going to give in. I'm being cooperative and I'm being unassertive. So I'm essentially letting you get what you want, maybe to a greater or lesser degree, but accommodating you rather than myself. And compromising is the midpoint on both dimensions. Compromising is a bit of a compromise. It's neither assertive nor unassertive. It's neither cooperative nor uncooperative. It's a compromise. And compromises very often are unsteady. They are not terribly sustainable. So very often you need to work to a better outcome than a compromise. 8 pros and cons of conflict. There are many more, and I could have gone into this in more depth. This is a quick analysis. So pros, it clears the air, or it can. Oh, I'm glad we had that conversation. It was difficult. I found it frustrating. I got emotional. I didn't really want to have it, but we know where we stand. It clears the air. It can introduce new rules. Okay, now we've talked about this, I can see where you stand. You can see where I do. I've reflected on my position. You've done the same. Let's introduce new rules. Let's go about things in a different way from here on in. It can modify goals. So conflict can cause it to say, hey, my position was unrealistic, or it was unrealistic. Well, it could be unrealistic in terms of, I was expecting too much, or maybe I should be more ambitious. So maybe a conflict can say, this is the goal that is more appropriate here, and it's only come about through a robust discussion about something that could easily otherwise have been avoided. So another pro of conflict is that it clarifies positions. Okay, if we hadn't had this discussion, I wouldn't know where you stand. Nor myself, for that matter. I've heard myself articulate things that I didn't know was truly my position. You might just say that to yourself. But if you have that difficult, robust, I'll say that word again, discussion sometimes, it can clarify positions. It can make it more clear what was otherwise assumed. On the downside, the cons of conflict, here are some, not all, it can waste time and energy. Sometimes avoiding is the best thing to do. Sometimes avoiding escalation of something can mean you don't waste time and energy. Sometimes also it creates organization and emotional stress. Again, avoidance. Just don't go there if it's going to mean that you just heap more hassle on yourself. Number 7 of the 8 in total, another con of conflict is it risks confrontation of suppressed issues. As soon as you go somewhere you otherwise wouldn't have got in conflict management terms, you might end up with issues. You find it hard to manage. It could result in matters long-term taking a turn for the worse in all sorts of ways. There are risks involved with this. Again, what is the option? Avoidance. Not long-term all the time, but avoidance for now, as long as it's not just about putting things off. And the last one is worsened relations. It is possible that conflict management doesn't go well. So if you have a go at it, if you try and do what it takes to seek at least to resolve something difficult, it can, irrespective of the hoped for outcomes, make things worse. There's no doubt about that. So it's got to be done well. I hope you found that useful. My website and details, which I've got here on the final slide, sorry listeners, but there you go, you've got it elsewhere, has a lot more on conflict management, both my websites, the podcast and my YouTube channel. This is a big issue and it's typically not done as well as it might be. So I do hope there's some thoughts and ideas there that are helpful to you. Thank you very much for listening or for viewing.